Conservative podcaster Tim Pool went on an expletive-filled tirade against Robbie's favourite person, Candace Owens, in a recent episode of his podcast. Owens has been a highly controversial figure in Conservative circles in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination.
She has questioned the official story of his death and has targeted Kirk's widow, Erica, and his organization Turning Point USA. Tim Pool suggested that Owens is directly contributing to the downfall of TPUSA by turning her followers against it.
The organization that helped get Donald Trump elected, which needs to persist, you don't got to be a fan of it, but it certainly will help get individual congressional candidates elected and stop Democrats from launching new committees and putting more people in prison like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro. Instead, it's being gutted by psychopaths telling people to pull their donations.
And from there, Poole turned up the intensity another notch.
She is burning everything down, and she's gloating and smiling while she does it. And you know what you told me? She has no security. She doesn't deal with the we have to deal with. She's a piece of shit. She's making everyone else suffer. It's all lies. It's all hypocrisy. And it is for the purpose of making money. And she does not live the way other people live. And she claims she liked Charlie. She loved Charlie. And she is burning everything down that he built because she is evil. She is evil. And I'll say it again. This conservative movement is fractured. It's fried, whatever it is.
Owens responded directly to Pool's rant, writing on X, "He is genuinely not well right now. I wouldn't turn this into a cheap internet moment. There's just so clearly something personal going on in his life. It's hard to run a business, and he's under pressure. Pray he comes through it." But other conservatives took Pool's side, with writer Bethany Mandel saying, having never seen Tim Pool anywhere near this angry, it's justified, about time people blow their tops with her.
Owens' suggestion that Pool is under pressure could be at least partially correct, because he said in that same episode that he might have to cancel the show soon if he doesn't start bringing in more money.
He claims he's had to dramatically increase his security costs because people have fired gunshots near his workplace. He suggested he's working on a solution to keep the show going, but that December 19th might have to be the final episode. And my understanding is it's not just his suggestion that they suffer some security issues. It's confirmed that they've had people on the premises that are concerning, shots fired, crazy people, all awful. I've been on Tim Pool's show once before, a long time ago. Amber Duke has been on it a couple times. Don't agree with everything Tim Pool says or a lot of the guests he has on, but it's a big platform, and it is absolutely wrong for anyone to respond to things he says with violence. I think that expletive-laden tirade was dead on. Was totally correct. Everyone's right. What can you say? She has no defenders left, virtually, because I don't know that she's evil. Imputes like a clarity of purpose to what she's doing. I think she's just really not very smart and has always been a grifter type personality, and she always does this when she, I'm going to pray for you. I think you're not well. It's so patronizing. I can't stand her and really never have, and found myself not able to hold back on that anymore. And I'm glad other people are feeling the same way. What she's doing to Erica is just, I think, absolutely awful. Suggesting that TPUSA might have had something to do with it, or Erica's trying to cash in on this, or might have even been involved, and the person they have in custody, who they have overwhelming evidence is guilty. There's not a question we have to solve. Well, why would it be that? We know why, and she can't present any evidence that actually contradicts that. She's just asking questions, but she has nothing. She has nothing on her side. She's been right about nothing, and she is profiting from this, and she's causing real pain to people, and she's awful. She's awful. I don't know what to say. She's awful.
While I was listening, or while we were watching the Tim Pool comments there in the introduction, I was thinking that he might dislike her even more than you do. Yeah. But perhaps not. Perhaps you're about the same, but you're just slightly more restrained in your language.
I've been there the whole time. I just don't. Now but I don't want to be hating on envious of success. She has a huge audience. I don't know what people see in her exactly, because to my mind, she asks these provocative questions, and I'm good with provocative questions. Tim Pool asks provocative questions too, but then you have to bring receipts eventually. You have to get one of these right.
Yeah.
And she never gets any of them right.
Well, one of the things that I think it's worth noting in passing here is that there was that interview that she did with CNN, and we are often critical of, mainstream or legacy media here. That is a very good interview of her, where her lack of receipts, to use your imagery, was very apparent, and she didn't really have any answers to the things that go on, the things that she was claiming or implying were true. Look, this isn't going to surprise you, but between Tim Pool and Candace Owens, I don't really feel like I have a dog in that fight. I mean, I find Tim Pool's views quite obnoxious, but that's fine. I certainly don't endorse or sympathise with anyone threatening or practising violence against him. If he is under genuine threat, then he shouldn't be, and that's bad. I guess, to your point, my broad impression is that he may come from a somewhat more politically sincere place.
He is very sincere.
Yeah,
absolutely. And he is someone who considered himself on the sort of independent populist left, and was really COVID and some other things brought him much more in explicit proximity to the right. But when I was on his show, we argued about antitrust and some economic issues where he was right along with your views.
Maybe we need to bring him back onto that side.
No, he's very sincere, and he's very good at what he does, and it's an interesting show, even though he has guests on that I think are crazy. But he also has some really good debates. They've done the Tim Pool Network, maybe not exactly his show because there's other programs on it, has done some really good debates on immigration policy, where they have my side, the more, well, let's have high-skilled immigration side very well represented by guests we've had on Rising. So I think it's doing a good job, and of course it would be, even if I thought the show was terrible, it would be absolutely unconscionable that would have to shut down because the heckler's veto, because they've raised the security costs. This is the same problem that controversial speakers often, though not always of a conservative ideology, face on college campuses, where the college will say, well, sorry, we got to cancel you because we can't afford the security it takes to bring you here. Well, that's giving license to people to make threats, and then have those threats succeed because they shut down speech. We can't have that. We can't normalize that. And I hope anyone who makes a threat or who shows up with a gun is swiftly brought to justice in that case or any other case.
Sure. On the point of the general sort of online right shenanigans that we're seeing play out
it
at
is
the moment.
Pretty bad these days.
It seems to be pretty bad. I mean, you're much more familiar with it than I am, and I'm watching as a somewhat interested outsider from that world. But one of the things that I'm curious about, and you probably know the answer to, is like Candace Owens, for example, with these theories or implications around the killing of Charlie Kirk, and she has certainly implied at times that Israel is involved in all of that. I'm curious if that has lost or gained her any audience appeal, because we've spoken before about Nick Fuentes, somebody who recently was lamenting he wasn't nominated to be Anti-Semite of the Year, but he's somebody who seems, depressingly to my mind, to have gained more traction and a bigger audience recently. Is Candace, going up or down in that way, do you think?
And funny enough, they are not. Nick Fuentes despises and dislikes and disparages Candace Owens because he also does not respect her. He thinks that many of these theories she proposed are incorrect, including that Israel bears some responsibility for Charlie Kirk's death. He does not accept that that's the case.
Right, okay.
His very bad and very hateful views are frankly more grounded in reality or some argument you can muster than hers are, which are just truly like, France is trying to kill me. That it's not even an argument you can refute. Like, you can argue why sexism is wrong and why racism is wrong. How do I argue whether Brigitte Macron is a man or do you know what I'm saying?
I'd actually completely forgotten about the Macron thing until you mentioned it, because I don't think that any of Nick Fuentes' views are grounded in reality either.
Grounded in reality is the wrong way to, but it's
prejudice.
Well, it's his opinion. I don't know. It's something you argue. How do I argue that the sky is blue rather than red? The ground is green rather. I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Macron, like, they're trying to kill me because I have exposed the fact that, like, this woman was a man, which she wasn't. I don't know where you go with that, really.
But anyway, it's all getting us into a very unhealthy place on the right, for certain. I don't know whether Candace is really growing her audience or not, but it does seem clear that Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA was, I guess, holding back some broader division on the right that we were not aware of, or that has spilled out into the open following his death, with some principled splits between people on foreign policy that I think should be the subject of rigorous debate. Where I have no problem that a more neoconservative or whatever it was, hegemonic view of the establishment conservative speakers that was not well represented by the people has come under greater scrutiny. That's fine, but also some more ugly and unsavory characters who have that view, but then also have some bad views and then some insane views are now are gaining in prominence. Maybe, but then with Nick Fuentes, you run into so much of it is actually foreign. The boosting of him. There was some analysis this week I saw about how his posts keep going so viral on X, suggesting that it is a massive foreign influence campaign,
like a bot farm type thing?
Yes, from Middle Eastern people that are against Israel. So an argument that I was always very reluctant to endorse, because when they said that about Russia, it was mostly, not entirely, but mostly untrue.
Well, the scale of it seemed to be exaggerated.
The scale of it exaggerated.
Yeah.
And the scale of it might be being exaggerated here. I would certainly not say that it's totally insincere. We periodically have Republican staffers caught sharing pro-Fuentes stuff or heritage or whatever, so...
Yeah, there seems to be some suspicion around it, at least. Yeah, I mean, I've said this before. I mean, as someone who is vigorously critical of Israel and its conduct in Gaza, I don't want the support, or certainly don't want to be aligned with people like Nick Fuentes, whose opposition seems to be anti-Semitic in a really blatant way. But in terms of the overall online right thing, from my more distant perspective, it seems partly a consequence that you've these massively self-promoting characters all trying to clamber over each other, right? That's part of it, as well as the broader ideology.
Right, and none of this is going to help elect more Republicans. That's if you care about that at all. I think this is mirroring some of the dysfunction of the left personalities who were bigger on YouTube at the start of the pandemic. The pandemic really did cause, I saw it, I witnessed it firsthand hosting the show through the pandemic, how the left really split over the issue of how to handle COVID mitigation, with some people wanting to follow the science and this is a long code, this is going to disable people. What about workers' protections? What about all of that? On one hand, but what about body autonomy? What about it's my body, my choice? I'm supposed to inject myself with something? Really split the left, and I'm seeing a similar kind of split on the right about this foreign policy question, and then the more wilder things that involves.
Bill Maher clashed with Young Turks host Anna Kasparian on a number of topics on his Club Random podcast yesterday.
The conversation got especially heated when it turned to the Middle East. Maher suggested that the Israeli city of Tel Aviv would be a better place for a woman to live than any other Middle Eastern city. Let's watch.
Where would you live? What city would you live in?
Well,
where do you think you'd be comfortable in that dress?
I'm sure it would not be comfortable in this dress in any of the various Middle Eastern countries that have been destabilized by...
You're not really blaming it on whitey.
Listen.
Are you? You're blaming Islam on whitey?
I'm not blaming Islam on whitey.
What you're saying is we destabilized. That's why you can't wear that dress.
Did we not destabilize?
Wait a second.
We were funding terrorist organizations in Syria during the Syrian civil war.
The two continued their argument, with Maher pressing the issue.
Uzbekistan, you could live there. Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. Oh,
none of the above. None of them.
Or Tel Aviv.
None of them. Literally none of them.
But if you had to choose one, you would. So to you, Karachi, Pakistan, and Tel Aviv, same thing.
I would figure something out, but
that's powerful. Not as smart as I know you are. That's. Come on. You're going to get killed. You're going to get killed for that for good reason.
Elsewhere in the show, Maher said he's had a falling out with late-night host Jimmy Kimmel and his wife. Maher was very critical of Kimmel's wife when she said last month that she'd lost relationships with family members who voted for Donald Trump. Maher said that although he's a fan of Kimmel, he stands by his criticisms.
She did lose family members. She wrote them before the election and said, here's 10 reasons why you just can't vote for Trump. And then some of them, just didn't follow that. And I was as kid glove as I could. And I see they're mad at me. And I'm sorry. I mean, I was being, again, as respectful as I could, but I don't agree with that point of view. So I hope we're friends forever, but I don't know. The liberals and the woke, that's a schism.
Anna's not going to go apartment shopping in Tel Aviv,
no,
it sounds like. So obviously the point Bill Maher was trying to get there was for, you're someone who's very critical of Israel, and she is extremely critical of Israel, constantly, all the time. Do you have any criticisms for Islamic-run countries that don't afford women or other people the same kind of rights? I think that's honestly, I am motivated by that point a little bit, and I think it's fair to bring it up for the people who are just Israel, Israel, Israel all the time, which I find obnoxious. But, I mostly agree with Anna more than Bill on this, not overall, but on this, the issue of the Middle East, I agree with, but it's not because we funded whatever is the reason that, that's we shouldn't have done those things, we should have intervened, but we are not responsible for Islamic theocracies running countries. That's the region, that's those countries, that's how they want to live. I don't know if that's not how a lot of people there want to live, that's not how a lot of people in Iran want to live. But they have an Islamic theocratic government. I don't think we should overthrow their government. I don't think it's our problem. But I'm allowed to say that's bad, and all things being equal, I couldn't live in Iran. I could live in Tel Aviv just fine, and that's a fair point to me.
I think that the problem here is that Maher and people who espouse his kind of views on Israel and the Palestinians, in my view, tend to use that argument as a diversionary tactic. Now, there are obviously human rights. Human rights is an issue that should be universally applied. We were just talking yesterday about Qatar and the fact that it has a very poor human rights record. So does Saudi Arabia. So do various other places. But then you get into this thing where, for example, during the time that the student demonstrations over Palestine were at their height, you would quite often get people saying, if there were gay or LGBT people involved in those demonstrations, oh well, try that under Hamas. That's not really the point. I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu and his government aren't slaughtering people in Gaza to secure rights for gay people. Like, the two things are separate. The reason that the Israeli actions have caused such outrage has been the sheer number of people they've killed, the use of starvation as a weapon of war. I mean, all the things that have led to Netanyahu himself being an accused war criminal. That's actually a separate argument from what is the most equitable way to manage a society. There are human rights abuses in lots of places. Those are wrong, fine to call them out. But saying to Anna Kasparian, well, would you like to live in Tel Aviv, or would you prefer to live in Tel Aviv than Riyadh? I'm just not sure what that gets us. I mean, the problem is Israel is in occupation of the West Bank, has been for half a century, and has carried out just mass killings in Gaza.
Well, right. I think the point is, this is one of the things I don't like about the left's foreign policy, even as as a non-interventionist, I find a lot of common ground with people on the left, is a kind of hand. Well, yes, there are human rights abuses everywhere. Like, the bulk of the human rights abuses globally are constant. America's bad foreign policy choices do not tilt the scale of things to be the West as the major, like the bulk of human rights abuse, well, frankly, is China, because China is so vast and is so abusive of its own people and the people
and puts people in camps and things.
And Russia's massive. These are not. So it's not an Islam-specific thing. Right. Those are the main government that is responsible for the most widespread deprivations of human rights is not is not religious at all, is the Chinese authoritarian system. The most despotic government probably in our planet is North Korea's government, not Muslim either. But the Muslim part of the world, the Muslim-run governments of the world have a lot of human rights violations that sometimes that is just, I felt, put aside. And specifically in the, well, this doesn't even have to do with the Muslim necessarily, but in the gay context, some people get, and I feel motivated by this hypocrisy as well. Like, for instance, when Disney gets really upset, they would never do this again because wokeness is dead. But when they get really upset about, Florida, wanting to alter the curriculum or whatever to not have
the so-called don't say gay.
Right, a very specific, slight, you can debate it. They're furious about that. But Disney cruises still stop in islands in the Caribbean where homosexuality is criminalized. And they don't care. So why do you're really worked up about a trivial thing, you're missing the forest for the trees. And that is a hypocrisy that I think it's fine to point out.
I think that there are some times when certain moral or ethical values are pretty selectively applied.
Right.
And I would say,
that's what I'm saying.
And to your point, on the very, very hard edges of the left, I do think, and I think we spoke about this before once, there can be, I think, a propensity to romanticize any regime that is opposed to the United States, right? Or to rationalize away failings of those regimes.
Some people on the right are doing that now too. Tucker Carlson is like, but Maduro is anti-gay, so that makes him good.
Yeah,
Maduro's like, why do we care at all? That's insane.
Right. So that kind of thing, I think, should be stood up against. It's just that I think that Maher has got himself for a long time on what I strongly believe is the wrong side of the issue on Israel and the Palestinians.
Yeah.
He has taken at least some significant amount of flack for that, rightly so in my opinion. And it is just a way to sort of try to weasel out of that, to not debate those core issues of indiscriminate killing, use of starvation, all of that, and instead talk about Anna Kasparian's dress.
Yeah, well, I love Anna Kasparian. I'm a big fan.
I liked her dress as well, if we're allowed to say that. Hopefully I don't get cancelled for that.
Hopefully you don't get cancelled.
No.
Well, I'll be at the Tel Aviv Pride Parade, so I won't be cancelled.
More revelations about Jeffrey Epstein may be on the way soon, after a federal judge ruled this week that secret grand jury transcripts from the 2019 sex trafficking case can be made public.
The judge reversed his earlier decision to keep the material privileged. At the time, he had called the approximately 70 pages of grand jury materials a, quote, merely hearsay snippet of Epstein's conduct, but he's now changed his tune Wednesday, citing the Epstein Files Transparency Act, passed last month, that requires the government to disclose its files on Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell.
And this isn't the first judge to cite that new law in recent decisions. Just a day prior, a different federal judge ordered the release of records from Maxwell's 2021 sex trafficking case. And last week, a third judge in Florida unsealed the transcripts from an abandoned federal grand jury investigation into Epstein back in the 2000s. In response, Democratic lawmakers are celebrating the speed with which the new law is being implemented. Congressman Ro Khanna of California, writing on X, "American democracy is working. A third judge just ordered the release of files because of Representative Massey and my Epstein Files Transparency Act." And Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin went on MS Now last night to say this.
These judges are very strictly implementing the legislative intent behind the statute. The truth is going to come out now under this law, and there is a tremendous momentum behind the disclosure, not just of the grand jury records, but of all of the discovery materials. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of documents that are going to be released.
Meantime, the DOJ has yet to release the majority of the files under their purview. The deadline for that to happen is coming up on December 19th. According to CBS, several of Epstein's survivors have teamed up with a group of congressional Democrats to ask the DOJ's Inspector General for an independent review of those case files to determine if they have been tampered with or concealed in any way. The judges are doing what this new law instructs them to do, and that's a good thing. Congress voted to give us more information because people are understandably not satisfied with the Epstein matter so far, with the promises that FBI leadership made about disclosure that kind of got retracted when they got into office. How Pam Bondi has handled this was not good. So, yeah, I'm glad that they're releasing more things. The judge is not wrong to warn of this being unusual because it is hearsay. It is an investigative file, can have misinformation in it. That's something Michael Tracy warned about when I had him on Rising. That's something New York Times has warned about. But people clearly need more access to information. That's clear desire of both Democrats and a substantial portion of the MAGA base. So, good.
Yeah, I think that's
good.
I think that's right. I think that it'll be interesting to see whether all of the material in government files generally is released, because of course this covers grand jury proceedings, and some of those grand jury proceedings are, fairly abbreviated. There's one of these cases where, according to reports, it was simply an FBI agent kind of walked into the grand jury and said, we've got this, and this, and sought an indictment. So obviously there is an enormous public appetite, understandably, for material about Epstein. We've talked, of course, a number of times about the matter, but it is so shady in so many different ways that this predator, who was very well connected to very rich and very powerful people of both parties, was able to get off so lightly for what seems heinous conduct. Obviously, people are curious about that. I'm glad, actually, that curiosity has been now fairly across the board, I would say. Obviously, Trump's perceived reticence about releasing the material caused him some problem with Republican voters. He was going to lose the vote in Congress in terms of the discharge petition, which was Massey and Candace thing. And so rather than suffer that defeat, he was like, I support it. A very late change of view. But absolutely, it's good that the stuff is going to be disclosed.
Do you worry a little bit about almost like Epstein information overload? Like they keep talking about thousands more pages coming, thousands more files coming. Some of this information is just is duplicative, will be similar to what we already know. Lots of information already released. I worry about, I don't know, creating the impression that there's more and more, there's so much. How can we even process this? I mean, you're going to have to rely on reporters, media figures, people who paid close attention to what this means, to then process, even for us, process it so we can process it for viewers. And people are so understandably rocked by the Epstein scandal and so distrustful of sources of authority. I feel like every time people are told we haven't actually learned all that much more, they say, well, now you're in on it too. You're also holding it back.
I think it is true that anything where there's a big public cloud of suspicion ends up in a situation where people are never satisfied. I mean, that goes back to at least the JFK assassination, where
very similar to that. It's becoming very similar to that.
Files keep coming out, and
still we get disclosure of new files that doesn't really tell us anything beyond what what most people know and have accepted is the truth, but a significant proportion of the population still doesn't because it's weird.
Well, that's true, but it is also true, I think, that in cases like this, broadly speaking, more information is better than less information.
Clearly.
And it's better to have the stuff out there. There are caveats in terms of protecting the identity of victims. Something that I think does have a downside is the guilt being imputed if people simply knew Jeffrey Epstein. Now, if people were in close contact with him, of course they should answer questions and they should be asked to clarify what the nature of that relationship was.
Depends on when they were close with him.
Right.
For me, broad forgiveness if it's way back when.
Before he was convicted.
After that he is charged and incarcerated for sex crimes, and then you're still having contact, as was the case with Bill Gates, Stacey Plaskett, Larry Summers, Steve Bannon, and on and on.
And on and on, and also the big problem for he's now the former Prince Andrew. I can't remember what his non-title is now.
Right. Just Andrew, just Andy.
Exactly, Andrew Windsor.
Yeah.
The issue with him was if I'm recalling this correctly, stayed in Epstein's house after the first case and was asked to explain that in a pretty famous BBC interview and proved completely unable to do so. So those kind of things, I think, are very valid questions. It's just, will people be named and guilt be imputed upon them without actually any nefarious conduct?
Yeah, and will people, be satisfied when we're able to go through this information? And I think people need new names of participants in the abuse of underage women, and short of that, but then it's like we gotta give the mob something is not a tendency I necessarily love.
Yeah, I mean, but there has been very good reporting done on this. I mean, over on Drop Site News, for example, they've done quite a lot of reporting on Israeli connections with Epstein and former senior figures in Israeli politics. Things like that, on one hand, can feed conspiracy theories, but on the other hand, it's better to know it than not.
You know who's a big fan of that reporting? Benjamin Netanyahu, because he perceived that it was his opposition in Israel was much more complicit in the Epstein stuff. I believe he retweeted Ryan Grimm on this subject.
First time ever myself and Benjamin Netanyahu have been on the same page.
CNN host Jake Tapper is defending his colleague Caitlin Collins after she was the target of a Truth Social rant from President Trump on Saturday morning. Trump wrote in part, "Caitlin Collins of fake news CNN, always stupid and nasty, asked me why the new ballroom was costing more money than originally thought 1 year ago. I said because it's going to be double the size and the quality of finishes and interiors has been brought to the highest level. Interestingly and seldom reported, there are no taxpayer dollars involved. It's being paid fully by private donations. Fake news CNN, the guy who runs the whole corrupt operation that owns it, is one of the worst in the business. Their ratings are so low that they're not even counted or relevant anymore."
That post prompted a response from Tapper, who's worked at CNN with Collins for more than 8 years together. He wrote on X, "Caitlin Collins, she's smart, she's nice. It's a legitimate question about construction of a controversial project on White House grounds. Thanks for the explanation. Generally speaking, if someone or something is irrelevant, the president doesn't talk about them." In a separate incident, Trump appeared to question the intelligence of a reporter while taking questions aboard Air Force One. Here's the moment in question and Daily Show host Jon Stewart's reaction to it.
I took a cognitive test and I aced it. I got a perfect mark, which you would be incapable of doing. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you
too.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Two things here that I love. The first is when he goes, "You too." And the woman on the right whose face is like, "What the f*** did I do?" I'm just standing there. She's the one with the cognitive question. I'm just you couldn't finish the cognitive test and f*** you too. Like what?
And Stewart continued, suggesting that Trump has made a habit of lashing out at reporters, especially, apparently, according to Stewart, female reporters recently. Let's watch.
It seems like about a week ago, someone on Trump's press team was like, "You got to stop calling the female reporters ugly and piggy." And he was like, "Got it. I won't do that anymore at all. I know what I'll do. You're stupid."
Oh, Trump, how much you don't like him, Niall.
Well, I don't.
What?
I do, however, like in the Jon Stewart clip, the woman on the right who looks slightly perplexed is someone I do like a lot, which is Libby Dean from our sister network News Nation, who somehow got caught up in that exchange where Trump was directing his ire at someone and then brought Libby into it for some reason.
Who could assuredly ace a cognitive test.
Assuredly,
I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, well, with the Caitlin Collins thing to begin with, it's a pretty standard question, questions about the renovation project, and then it is a question that permits him to give what is, I think, a probably pretty broadly favorable and acceptable pitch on behalf of the administration that actually this is being paid for not with taxpayer funds at all, entirely privately donated, which I think is a good thing. So you would think he would not necessarily lash out at the opportunity being afforded to him to make that clear. It's not really it's not a hostile question is what I'm saying. It's a question from what he perceives to be a hostile network.
Yeah.
But he's also upset with how Fox News covers him and how the Wall Street Journal covers him, and he's just upset with everybody. And it's just, it's all got to be, we love you all the time. And I mean, come on, what do you want? That wouldn't be an independent press at all.
Absolutely. So, first of all, a completely legitimate question by Caitlin Collins. I think Caitlin Collins is a very good, legitimate journalist. It is true that Trump has issues with CNN for other reasons. It is also true that he can make the argument, which you've just outlined, about it being paid for private funds, but it is still a valid question to say, why has the expense now spiraled way up from what it had been? The bigger point, I think, beyond Caitlin, who was unfairly criticised in those sort of weirdly petty terms. I think he called her stupid or something. Right. She obviously isn't.
I mean, she grilled. We talked about. Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
She grilled Jasmine Crockett for wrongly smearing Republicans of having taken money from Jeffrey Epstein. It was a different Jeffrey Epstein. Mm-hmm. She went real hard on her for that. I like the perception that they never go hard on Democrats. And now they have panel shows where they actually do quite well represent. Mm-hmm. They have Batya Ungar-Sargon a lot. They've had other actual MAGA people. Scott Jennings does a great job. Kevin O'Leary. They have a range of perspective. They're just not. I know the old criticism of CNN that it was just, news, very anti-Trump under the guise of it being objective news. I don't think you can fairly say that about the network these days.
I agree. I agree. And I mean, I think that previous criticism was sort of much more under the Jeff Zucker years, where I think CNN, to its own detriment, got kind of dragged in sometimes to a trollish kind of thing. I don't think that is the case at this point. I certainly don't think it's the case with either Tapper or Collins. But the other point here, I think, is Trump's, one of the things that most mystifies me about Trump is how he poses as this macho or courageous figure. And that posture seems to be accepted by many of his supporters. Mm-hmm. While in fact he's the most thin-skinned, whiny person imaginable, asked completely normal questions, and he just goes off on people for it, as we're seeing here with Caitlin. Mm-hmm. We see this in various other situations, and recently in ways that are even less acceptable. I mean, the quiet piggy thing, I mean, surely we can all agree that that's just disgraceful. There's no humour in that. That's just boorishness and bullying, and utterly, it would be disgraceful if the boss in an office environment did it, never mind the President of the United States.
The boss in an office environment did it? That would be the end for them?
Yeah, it would. Yeah. For good reason.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying at the same time, but then I just can't clutch my pearls too much, because the anti-Trump commentary is also just as vicious and petty and insulting of his mocking of his appearance and all that related things. So then it's like, why should he behave? I mean, I think it would be better if the discourse was more civil and more about ideas and policies rather than petty, insulting characteristics. I think he might have been happier if he was just a insult, entertainment, comic figure, as he was before he entered politics. And he obviously brought a lot of the behavior that he manifested as a constant presence on television, on a network run by Jeff Zucker, frankly. He brought that to the presidency. He brought that same set of skills, and it has, for some reason, resonated with the American people.
Yeah, but you see, here's where I have a bit of an issue with that argument. I think it is true that Trump, in many ways, is more of a kind of, his model is more like talk radio, like Rush Limbaugh kind of shock jock in a way than it is a conventional politician. I think that's
just
true.
Like Joan Rivers' red carpet commentary is what it is. Oh, you look fat today. Oh, that looks horrible. That's
yeah. But the point is, he's the president of the United States. And sometimes when people say, well, the anti-Trump commentary is the same as what he says, they're comparing the president of the United States on one hand with often rather online or fringy liberal, like, oh, Michael Moore said this, or Joy Reid said that, or Rachel Maddow said this, versus the President of the United States. No, I for what it's worth, I don't think Maddow or Joy Reid, Michael Moore's a different category. I don't think Maddow in particular indulges in that kind of personal invective, nor does Joy Reid for the most part. But the whole point here is that there should be higher standards expected of people in elected office. And to say that it would be the same on the Liberal side, I mean, if Caroline Levitt got into it in the briefing room with someone from a Liberal outlet, and that person from the Liberal outlet said, "Quiet, piggy," I mean, there'd be absolute uproar. Yeah. But yet it is permissible somehow, or Republicans at least minimize it when it comes from the President of the United States.
Yeah, he shouldn't have said it. There's no way around it. Shouldn't have said it. In a highly predictable turn of events, Texas has a new Democrat jumping into the 2026 race. Be still my beating heart. Take a look.
She's the new star of the Democrat Party, Jasmine Crockett. They're in big trouble.
But you have this woman, Crockett. She's a very low IQ person. Somebody said the other day she's one of the leaders of the party. I said, you got to be kidding.
Now they're going to rely on Crockett. Crockett's going to bring them back.
Yes, that's right. Democratic firebrand Jasmine Crockett launching her campaign for the Senate yesterday.
The Congresswoman was long rumoured to be considering a bid, but the official announcement came on Monday. Take a listen to what she had to say at her launch event. Crockett joins a hotly contested race for the Democratic nomination. 2024 Democratic Senate nominee Colin Allred dropped out of the race earlier yesterday, clearing the way for a showdown between the Congresswoman and state lawmaker James Tallarico. Tallarico even welcomed Crockett into the race with his own video yesterday. Take a look.
On behalf of all of us, I want to welcome Congresswoman Crockett into the Democratic primary race. We have always maintained that we are pro our campaign, not anti anyone else's. We will make the case for why we are best positioned to win this race in November and take power back for working people. But we will always treat Congresswoman Crockett with the utmost respect. She is my colleague and she is a leader in our state. She deserves nothing less.
As for conservatives, they seem to view Crockett's announcement less as a declaration for the U.S. Senate and more as a cringy political stunt. Matt Walsh referenced Trump's attacks in Crockett's launch video, writing on X, quote, "I never thought I'd say this, but I agree with every word of this Jasmine Crockett ad." And conservative influencer Link Lauren seemed downright gleeful at the idea of taking on Crockett's campaign.
This campaign is going to be so bad, but so entertaining. It's going to be like Baby Bop from Barney running for office. Okay, Jasmine Crockett just reminds me of Baby Bop these days. She also released a campaign video, which was her just standing there for 44 seconds while President Trump talked crap about her, and then she turned to the camera. It was honestly a perfect microcosm of Jasmine Crockett. She was not engaging with her constituents. It was all about her.
Senator John Cornyn, who currently holds the seat up for grabs in 2026, echoed that glee, telling Semaphore, quote, "I'll try to wipe the smile off my face. I would say it's a gift." Colin Allred, obviously he wasn't successful before, but he was what I would call closer to a normal Democrat than Jasmine is. She is something else. Ah, yes. Princess Jasmine enters the race. I, like my friends on the right, am just giddy with excitement for what this campaign will produce.
Be careful what you wish for, Robbie. I would say that. There are lots of people who are heralded or derided, I should say, as unelectable who turn out to do much better than anticipated. Here's what I'd say in Crockett's defense.
Yes.
in a situation where Democratic primary voters are animated in large part by horror at what Trump is doing, I don't think the launch video is necessarily that bad. I think there's an argument that if Trump hates you, you must be doing something right. And that's certainly an argument.
For a primary.
For a primary, certainly. Now, in relation to Crockett and her general political persona, I think that some of the criticisms of her, I would actually say, are more classist than racist, actually, because she has this propensity to talk in vernacular terms, and people mock her when, to my mind, she's sometimes making perfectly good points there. There's a clip, I think from last year, when she's referring to Project 2020, whatever that was, 2024, 2025?
2025.
Yeah, and she talks about, she uses words like homeboy and y'all and all that, while she's attacking people from the Heritage Foundation for sort of halfway acknowledging Trump's backing of the scheme without saying so directly. It's perfectly effective. It's just that she speaks in a way that some people bridle at. Now, I do have other doubts about her electability. One is she thinks you can change the electorate and draw new people into the process. To my chagrin, that is actually very difficult to do. And I'll shut up after this, but the final point I have about Crockett that makes me skeptical of her is, if you're trying to present yourself in sort of idealistic terms, or at least drawing the passions of your party, you have to represent that properly. And sometimes she can be just kind of too clever by half in a disingenuous way. So you'll remember there was the time where she was on the House floor and she talked about Republicans getting donations from somebody called Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
And then she later said, oh, I didn't have time to check. It was actually a different person by the same name.
Yeah.
She famously or infamously dubbed Governor Greg Abbott, who uses a wheelchair, Hot Wheels, and then when she was castigated for that, said, oh, I was referring to his movement of migrants within the US. Like, come on, like we're not five. That's obviously not true. So that's a problem.
That's the kind of stuff that I enjoy seeing from her, and I'm really hoping for more of it. Her theory of this race is, as you said, that there's this, that we just got to turn out more people. I'm going to win because I'm going to inspire all these angry, progressive Democratic people who aren't voting in Texas, and they're going to come out and elect me. So I should lean into everything that so infuriates the right, and frankly, I think what she suggested in some of her, to lean into identity as a thing that's going to turn out women and black people and all that. And that is a very bad strategy. I think it's been disproven multiple times, to your point. If you're going to winning in Texas is already a little bit of a Democratic pipe dream, I think. They've been way too overconfident on that in the past. I doubt, in terms of the statewide, the race against, for the actual seat, I don't think that kind of a campaign that leans into identity and just anger at Trump and is trying to turn out some massive leftist hiding in Texas, I think that's very, very fraught. Now, for the primary against Tallarico, I mean, I don't know. You're right. Stranger things have happened in a primary. It could be the more uncompromising progressive or anti-Trump person wins in the subset of voters who turn out for the primary. James Tallarico is a candidate who seems to be doing a lot correct for himself so far, so I think he's a formidable opponent. Additionally, I don't think this is just some very bland centrist Democrat who might get steamrolled in a primary. I think he is still the more likely person to prevail, though it's hard to tell.
Yeah, he seems quite a deft politician in a number of ways. Briefly on the electorate point,
his video to her was quite nice.
It was, yeah, and quite honourable. And he also doesn't want to be seen, I think, beating up on a black woman in a Democratic primary for obvious reasons.
Leave that to the Republicans.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'll be eager to do it. Briefly on the point about changing the electorate, before we spoke about this, I looked up one of my favourite statistics for illustrating how difficult that is to do. When Obama ran in 2008, and that was on the Democratic side the most exciting campaign of my lifetime probably, the share of black voters turning out rose by 2 points from 4 years before, and young voters under 30s rose by 1 point. Now, he won bigger shares, but that shows how difficult it is to fundamentally change the electorate.
Yeah. Now, the Republican side of this will be interesting, too, because John Cornyn's the incumbent.
Ken Paxton.
And he's facing Ken Paxton, who is a very flawed Republican, has some legal issues, and is disliked by other, but again, this is a classic, disliked by establishment Republican figures, but has a more bombastic, MAGA, the establishment is getting in my way sort of thing. So if he were to prevail in that race, beat John Cornyn, the incumbent in the primary, and then faces someone, faces Jasmine Crockett, I think he'd be a shoo-in. Faces James Tallarico, I don't know, maybe it would be an interesting race.
Just finally, on the asymmetry of some coverage sometimes, if Jasmine Crockett had the legal clouds over her that Ken Paxton had, she'd be literally a no-hoper. I think he gets away with it because he's a middle-aged white man on the Republican side.
How about that?